Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're listening to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, which made its triumphant comeback this weekend. It's more of a polite knock at the door than a busting off the hinges kind of start, but it was a welcome return all the same. There's no big shocks, perhaps the lack of shocks being one of the biggest surprises. Linfield, Cliftonville, Crews, Carrick, all snagging wins. Meanwhile, Colerane's new era got off to a stuttering start due to a Dylan worldie. We're going to be talking about all those games, plus Larne's success in Kosovo, Lee Bonis away to the Netherlands, as well as suggestions that the Irish League could soon see a 10-team top flight. We're going to be chatting about that and more on this, your latest weekly edition of Kicking Match. Before we dive into the meat and potatoes of this, I would just like to take a quick moment right here to express my gratitude. I want to say a massive thank you to you for the support this podcast has got in the past week. I obviously launched my massive season preview episode last week, and it has been an absolute barn burner for me. It has broken every marker this podcast has ever set since it launched. It's the most listened to episode I've ever done. In fact, it hit that marker and surpassed it within like 2 and a bit days. On Apple Podcasts, we peaked at 51 on the most listened to podcasts, soccer podcasts in the UK. Entirely the UK, we were 51 most listened to. We almost entered the top 200 for all of sports in the UK on Apple Podcasts. All of sports, almost the top 200, easily in the top 250. And here I am chatting about Irish League football. That just shows the amount of support that you've given me. I'm very thankful for that. The feedback has been amazing. I think that's the thing that struck a chord with me the most. Gotta shout out Ross and Joe from Around the Grounds NI. They put the work in. They did an amazing job. I know you agree. On top of that, I should probably reference the new lick of paint. I was able to squeeze in a total refresh of the Kicking Match brand, launching with the new series, the third series of this. I've been working on that for a while. I'm just very lucky that I have a literal in-house designer with my wife, Alice. She doesn't understand football, but she was able to go through all my little references and make something that looks really stylish. I think it's great. And she very much waved her magic wand there. 2 years in, this continues to grow, and for that, I am very thankful. Of course, if you haven't checked out that podcast, it's mammoth. It talks about every single team in the league. You can do that now. You can do that anytime you want via whatever platform of choice you listen to your podcast. Any review on those platforms will be very kind. It all does help me very, very much. If you are in fact new here, this podcast is weekly, so make sure you don't miss an episode by hitting that subscribe/follow button on whatever your platform of choice is. All going well, I do intend to get these podcasts with you every week, every Tuesday evening. Sometimes they may be a bit earlier, a bit later, maybe Mondays, maybe Wednesdays. You know how life is. But if you subscribe, you'll get a free notification to let you know it's up. Go check it out. You can sit back, relax. Don't worry about it. But let's get on to what you're actually here to listen to, as we are back to the grind, my friend. We've got games, goals, controversies, and news stories to talk about. And with everything that's been going on in the big world of Irish League football, there is a lot to natter through. And I'm going to be doing it this week in the company of the host of the Glentoran podcast, the Shout at the Oval podcast, Man About Town of East Belfast. It's Matthew Brown.
Thanks very much, Peter. It's a pleasure to be back in some actual football talk about this time, rather than just sort of guessing random European results that we got absolutely wrong.
Totally wrong. I feel like, was it my dreams that were wrong or my perception of reality? I don't like either of those answers. But football's back, and it was kind of a funny opening weekend, don't you think? Like, it's that time of the season where we can't help ourselves but say it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. But based on everything that we've seen so far, is there any team that could say that they've hit the ground running after that opening weekend? Nothing was totally bad, but they were building themselves up. Everyone will hope for something more from their teams moving forward, I'd say.
Yeah, well, I think the Carrick are probably the happiest, albeit they beat what in my opinion is the worst team in the division. But Stuart King came out afterwards and said it's the best team Carrick have ever had. And I put up on Twitter their cursed words, because people said that about many Glentoran teams since the takeover. And it is not like that all the time, I can tell you.
Well, one team I think could definitely lay claim that the team going into the 2024-25 season is their greatest team ever is Larne FC, and they are able to double down on that after reversing all of the bad fortune and poor results that all of the Irish League sides have had in Europe by going to Kosovo and actually winning. It was a really professional performance out there in Kosovo, and it's little Matty Lusty who's there in the box to stick the leg out, get that late goal for them. They're 1-0 up now going into the second leg, and they take it to Inver Park, and there must be a bit of confidence, belief after being able to hold this team to not scoring past them at all. They bring them back to their place. They have a real chance for progression here now.
Yeah, that's an absolutely ridiculous result, really, for Larne, and you really would fancy them just to win at home. But of course, that's not always the case, and this team are clearly quite strong. I doubt they've got that much worse from last year when they absolutely hammered Larne. So it was I had to be honest, as an Irish League fan, as a Glentoran fan, I generally don't want the teams in the Irish League to do well because then they get this big windfall and it just puts them in a financial position that's better than us. But in this occasion, I actually do want Larne to win because the Irish League is in such a state of a sort of crisis because we're running the risk of losing the European spot. So we could really do with Larne going through another round because it just doesn't bear thinking about if we were to lose our playoff spot.
We're one of the worst performing leagues in the entirety of Europe. Without that win, we would be almost scraping the barrel there, and it could all fall down again come this week at Inver Park. And another part of that game is that we now know it was the final outing, it was the final contribution of one Lee Bonis. And what a final contribution he made. He was the man who was high up the pitch, pressed them hard, won the ball, and then was then tackled to get that free kick that was whipped in. He flicked it on, and if Larne are able to get through, not only is he going to be able to claim that the transfer that he's earned his team can be reinvested, it can be further money be put into the club. I think this is a big transfer this summer in Irish League circles. It's been talked about for a while. Lee Bonis, he's away. He's playing in the Netherlands. Interesting move.
Yeah, it's almost as random, if not maybe more random, as when Liam Boyce went and joined Werder Bremen. His is obviously a bit of a step down from that, but even still, it's a really interesting move. Obviously, we've had players go over. I think Michael O'Connor was over in like Sweden or something. You've got loads of players that have gone over and played for Thomas Stewart's team. You've got players who have dabbled in other leagues, and Bigger Ramana was over playing in an African league. So you do have those sort of random transfers, but this one here is such a young age as well. He's still making a name for himself, and he gets to go over and play Dutch football. It's be interesting to see if he sticks it out over there or if he comes back. But I mean, he's seen something he likes, and they've seen something that they liked as well.
He's been given the number 9 shirt, so that says that they are backing him to be a striker. He's just turned 25, and as much as this is not something that Larne fans wanted to hear beforehand, I think this summer needed to be the time. It was a key time for Lee to move. There was all this talk last year of big fees being bandied about from a League One or a Championship side. There was a variety of teams that were apparently sniffing around him. That didn't come off, and then he had a further season in the Irish League where he was somewhat eclipsed by Andy Ryan, obviously a player who was a more senior player than him, and in that Larne side they've got to share about the goals. He had a bit of time, struggled with injuries, and I think he would have to go into this season to try and get a similarly sized move and be on fire, score huge amount of goals. And again, it's another year away from maybe taking further steps. And the second level of Dutch football is it's a significant step up. You can see how when Lee stepped up from part-time football to full-time football with Larne, how he took it in his stride and his ability just multiplied. You could even see that when he went from mid-Ulster football to Portadown, how when he got his feet under the table, he was very calm and took it in his stride. You've got to believe, out of all the players in the league, he is a player who looks like he's willing to put in the work in to take this step up.
Yeah, 100%. Like I was saying there that he's still young enough, and 25 is a really good age to move. I think he's got loads of good lived football experience in men's football. He's done the full time. He was a roofer a few years ago, which is crazy to think. So he's grafted and he's got there. I think the 25 is a good age to move away from home as well, especially to a foreign country, albeit Holland is, it's fairly English speaking. They speak pretty good English in those sort of countries. So I think it's a really interesting move for him. And I think you're right. I think that he is right to make the move now, because why would he turn it down and risk, anything can happen. He could get injured this season, or he could just not have a great season. And then he could just be stuck in the Irish League saying, what if? Whereas if he goes away here and it doesn't quite work out, he'll have no shortage of takers. I'm sure Larne will take him back. I'm sure he'd come back and he'd probably demand an even higher wage for himself as well, because there'll be a bit of a bidding war for him.
We've seen in previous years some of the top striking talent in particular from our league go elsewhere, and you allude to it a bit there. It doesn't really work out and then they come back. That hasn't been such a common story in recent times over the past decade. I think when I look at the type of player Lee Bonis is, I don't have as much fear of that happening. One, because of the track record of him constantly stepping up to a higher level, but also the quality of a player that he is. I think you and I have talked about this before, about how maybe some of the goal poaching strikers, the kind of fox in the box type Robbie Fowler players, where they're getting huge numbers, but they don't ever get serious attention beyond, because perhaps they lack some sort of physical trait or maybe some sort of tactical nous that they don't believe they can take the step up. You look at Lee Bonis, what's his game? It's physicality, it's seeing the grass in front of him and speeding through it. He has a weapon of a right foot and can do a lot. In fact, he's almost your all-round striker without that kind of real predatory player. He almost, when you see his goals, they're all from beating a man and taking it down. And I think those are traits that are easily transferable to higher up the pyramid in football.
Yeah, well, I've referred to him before as the Irish League Bobby Firmino, because it was a bit like that for him at Liverpool. He was the sort of cog that make everything tick. He would muck in, he would drop deep, he would link up play, but he'd score goals as well. And all his goals were always involving really hard work. And I think that Lee Bonis has probably got attention because of, you've got all these scouting networks now, like Y Scout, and there's so much video footage of players on there that you'd be absolutely amazed. I signed up to a free trial of it not that long ago, just the whole way looking. It's the data they've got on players and the footage they've got on players, so you can see why someone would have ticked a few boxes and seen, well, is there a player like this out there? And they would have seen Lee. And maybe that's what that sort of second tier Dutch football is like. I mean, Dutch football itself is known for this sort of pass and move game, working hard. And maybe that transfers the whole way down the pyramid.
You can see how someone from another league could view him as a money ball type smart signing. From Lee's point of view, he was a professional at Larne. He obviously wants to take his career to the highest possible plane he can. And as a part of that, I think he was on the fringes of it last year. The ambition is surely stake the claim to be in this Northern Ireland squad eventually.
Yeah, but you have to sort of think Michael O'Neill's a bit funny, isn't he, about picking players from different leagues that he can't regularly watch. I think he's sort of shunted a couple of players before. Remember that Niall McGinn went and played out in China?
South Korea?
Or South Korea, yeah. That's I was close. Yeah, he went out and played in South Korea. That's right. And he sort of Niall McGinn and Michael O'Neill wasn't too keen on him then, and he's done that with a few players, I think. So it'd be interesting to see, because surely he's always claimed, like Michael O'Neill has, that he wants his players to play at a higher level. And he said that, for example, I think he made a comment last year that League Two in England, when Paul Smith was scoring goals for Leyton Orient, wasn't a high enough level. I think that this is probably a higher level than that. And I think that if he's sort of backed himself into that corner, then he's going to have to send a scout, or he's going to have to watch these videos. He's going to have to do something. Lee Bonis has to be in contention for that squad.
One thing that I put out on Twitter, and I posted to fans out there, is where does Lee Bonis rank when it comes to 21st century Irish League strikers? His sample size isn't as big as some of the greats. But I don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I think he is a top 10 Irish League striker since the turn of millennium. And the reason why I back him so much is that I think his goal scoring record clearly speaks for itself. Lots of goal contributions. He's played in a team at the bottom of the league. He played for a dominating team where he has to try and work his way in to try and get goals when there's other great players around him. He's won trophies, and I think it goes back to a lot of the physical traits which I've talked about: his speed, his agility, his power, his shot power, and actually he's probably an underrated player in bringing other people into the game. Like, he has great passing ability as well, and I'm not getting a lot of feeling from others that they agree, but I think top 10 guaranteed since 2000. Do you agree?
Well, it's a big shout because there is some top strikers out there that I've seen in my time, but I do understand where you're coming from because I see people will refer to Jordan Owens. People will refer to the likes of even Curtis Allen and players like that. Who Curtis Allen is an absolute Glentoran legend in my eyes. He was an excellent goal scorer, and likewise, Jordan Owens is a Crusaders legend. But were they good enough to maybe get a move like Bonis has? I don't think so. Well, Curtis Allen did get his move and it didn't work out for him. Jordan Owens was never touted as going away to another league. So I do understand where you're coming from. But I think it could maybe be recency bias on your part, or it could be misty eyed on other people's part for just dismissing it out of hand. It's probably impossible to compare because football has changed a lot, but he is a good player, but top 10, maybe. Top 20, definitely.
I understand that people think that there's perhaps a bit of recency bias, but with that recency bias comes in the fact that actually the league is probably better than it has been in the past at least 15 years or so, and with that he's had to compete with those higher levels. You take a player like Curtis Allen, I can see here that playing just in the top flight of Irish League football, in 354 appearances, he has scored 151 goals, assisted 39. So that is 190 goal contributions in that 350 games. You then take in what Lee Bonis has done since the past 5 years he's been playing Irish League football. In the same time, he, in 195 games, he's scored 88 goals, 25 assists, and 113 goal contributions. So if you think you would take that on into some of his maybe prime years of his career between 25 and 30, that would scream. I'm sure he's a Larne legend already, but a Irish League icon. I think actually one of the players you can compare him to, and you've seen that he got his big move, was Ronan Hale. Same age, in his time playing in the top flight in the Irish League, just the Premiership, because some of the cups can slightly waver stats. 122 games, 46 goals, 18 assists. That's 64 goal contributions. So big numbers from both players and very skillful players. And with this league improving, a part of that is your best players are going to get picked off. And slightly different strikers. I guess the question is now, how badly will this impact Larne? I imagine we're expecting them to find a key replacement, but without a ball in the league being kicked, it's a blow clearly to their overall squad. But will they need to get another striker in to fill this hole now?
Well, they've got Matty Lusty, don't they? He's been super in the Irish League since breaking through. I suppose you could say breaking through at Dungannon last year on loan. I thought he was great, but different type of player than Lee Bonis. They've obviously been linked to David Fisher. Not too sure if that's going to happen. I'd be surprised if it did happen. He's got a huge release clause, I hear. I think that they will dip back into the market, but they say Matty Lusty there. Maybe they'll just give him more of a chance. But
Matty Lusty's, if you squint slightly, you can see it as a one-for-one replacement. He has that speed, he has that ability to take on players, and I think last season we saw that improvement. So far in Europe, I think you've seen that he plays a similar type of game. He's probably closer to actually Andy Ryan than he would have been Lee Bonis. I'm sure people will be saying, well, you add in Lusty, you still have Paul O'Neill floating around there, who surely believes he can also, regardless if Lee Bonis was there, he could also stake his claim to be in that top two. McHenry's floating around. Will he be brought in as more of a striker? If you're trying to replace Bonis in the best way you can, and it's not really clear what his status is at the minute, but I understand that Benji McGee, I think there's always been comparisons between Lee Bonis and Benji McGee, but I can understand where it's apples for apples potentially there. A player who actually is happy to have the ball at his feet, can deliver a goal sometimes out of nowhere. I just think that perhaps, and there's no doubting here and it's not a slag, is that Benji McGee is a player that perhaps needs a bit more growth, development, and work on some aspects of his game, maybe ball control in there, instantly straight into that Larne team. But you can see that being an investment.
Yeah, I don't think anyway. I think that the best thing for Benji McGee's career, and probably the best thing for any Irish League team, is to let Benji McGee develop again at Loughgall, because I just think he was being linked to all these clubs this season for a huge fee, and it just would have been a detriment to his career. I feel he's had one good season in the Irish League. I just can't see Larne going there and bringing him in as a for replacement. I think that they're quite smart in the transfer window. They have made some mistakes in the past year, but they rectify them pretty quickly. I don't think they'll go out and splash that money. They probably have a profile of player they're looking. They like to. Everyone they've been linked to is quite young, isn't it? Like David Fisher, I think his name is David. He's only 21, despite the fact that he looks like he's about 30. So they're obviously going for more of a younger profile of player as well.
It makes sense. It's all a part of it's exactly why they put that investment in the Lee Bonis at the time. It's younger player. There was going to be resale. Perhaps we don't know what the fee is. It might not be as big as some people were expecting, but they were able to get a lot out of him. Still sell him all for a profit, I imagine. And you reinvest and you go again. And you never know. There could be a player sitting around that big Larne training facility, that player factory, which is really getting its cogs turning. That could suddenly emerge. But I think with the likes of the highly touted Jack Hastings going out on loan to Anna, that might not be what Larne want to rely on, especially with Linfield looking like they're going to really give this a go this year. Maybe Noah Stewart, which again, that's not exactly a one-for-one replacement, but again, it's all talk. We'll just have to see. Usually the Larne stuff, when it happens very, very quickly. And just quickly hitting on them playing again this week against Balcani. I want to back them, but again, I can see exactly how that RFS game, they just take their eye off the ball, lack of concentration. It's 1-1. I worry about them. So I'm not 100% backing Larne to do it. I think maybe Balcani can come back and show the quality of side that they are. Again, they duffed Larne last year, but they look like they're a different team to that team that beat them last summer. I guess you got to say Larne can do it, but it's just a question mark of will they do it?
It's not going to be easy at all. It's really not going to be easy at all, and they'll be under no illusions that it's going to be easy. And I'm not too sure that they will take their eye off the ball as such and get complacent. I think that Tiernan Inch will have it well drilled into them. Larne are probably one of the teams that you would fancy in that sort of position. Crusaders, funny enough, are another one, backs to the wall sort of performance. You'd fancy them to do well in, but I do sympathise with your sort of point of view. I think that I can see them also losing, but like I said, I do actually hope that they win, because we can't risk losing our coefficient place. That would be an absolute disaster.
Well, if what they were apparently watching on the plane to Kosovo is anything to go by, maybe they just all need to watch War Dogs once again. Maybe Love Actually, whatever inspired them, whatever it was, whatever book Cian Bolger did not want to detail that he was reading on that flight. Do it again, lads, and maybe you'll have a chance. You'll have another trip. And you know what? If they get through this, Larne, the draw, again, famous last words, the draw doesn't look too bad on the other side of it. So there really is an incentive to get through. Not only the money, but there is a chance that this could still be on. Big progression in Europe, and it'd be some turnaround if it was. But yeah, all the best to Larne on Thursday. Before we get into the games this weekend, some parts of news. Lots of discussions about some of the comments by Jared Lawler. Obviously, he's been doing the rounds media-wise, doing a bit of chat to promote the league. I was there at the league launch Friday, a week or so ago. lots of talk on there. He was saying about how he wants to move away from Irish League behaviour, and I think a lot of people kind of jumped on that. And really, what he was saying is it's time just to get super pro. It's the quirks are there, that's great, but it's time to get some more professionalism into the league, which will benefit fans. One of the things which has been getting a lot of traction, and I think it was a throwaway comment of when I heard it, maybe double down on that in other interviews. A 10-team league in the top flight. I don't think this is on. I don't think it's a big push for this. I think he's putting it out there to say, look, nothing in Irish League football is bolted down, even the amount of teams in the top flight. I think maybe going down to 10 doesn't have a huge amount of support. Would it shock you if that was something in 2 years it was on a ballot somewhere?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it went down to 10-team league. I think that they should be looking at, well, I like the 12-team league, but I think if they're going to go anyway, they might look to improve the quality and get a 14-team league maybe. But I don't think I couldn't see them going the other way, to be honest with you. I think it's just Jared Luller's one of these people. I think he's done a great job as CEO for NIFL. But I think he's one of these people who's, as you say, there's nothing off the table. He's willing to consider everything, and he's also willing to hold his hands up whenever a mistake's being made. And he's willing to try something and say, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else. For example, the way he put the Sunday football vote through last year, he held his hands up, made a mistake, went back this year and won the vote. So I think that he's just one of these people who comes up with ideas and he doesn't just keep them to himself. And people just sort of latch onto that because it's great content for newspapers and for
podcasts,
like TV channel podcasts. Yeah, it's great. Like it is. He's full of sound bites, but that's great. And it's great that he's willing to think like that because for so many years the Irish League was just stuck in this rut and. It took them, I don't know how long to go through a proper advertising campaign. I don't know if you remember it. And this was a huge thing at the time where they went and bought the billboards and they got the players out and it was like no prawn sandwiches and it was all the Irish League players and they put that around the billboards and that was seen as like groundbreaking at the time. Jared Lawler's coming up with ideas like that there on a daily basis and trying them out and everything's improved in the league under him, in my opinion. So you just got to listen to what he says, but I'd be absolutely amazed if we were to go to a 10-team league.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's been a feeling of around this league for a while that it is a very traditionalist league in its view, and NIFL in recent years have somewhat shaken the tree. And obviously, for some people who disagree with some of these suggestions, they'll want to express their distaste for those ideas. Like on the 10-team league thing, again, I think it's just. You never know. Could be. Obviously, the League of Ireland is only 10 teams. The pros of a 10-team league, I guess, would be more games against better opposition, against big fan bases. I'm sure if you were one of the top clubs, do you want to have a team coming in with 100 away fans, or do you want to play against a team that has 600 away fans? It's all about money. It's a business. And in comparison, I actually did this. I did look through this. Teams that have 10-team leagues: Albania, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Croatia, Estonia, Faroes, Georgia, Gibraltar, Kosovo, Lithuania, Montenegro, obviously the Republic of Ireland, Slovenia, and Switzerland. But the teams that have 12: Austria, Bosnia, Denmark, Finland, Hungary, Iceland, Malta, North Macedonia, Scotland, Slovakia, and Wales. So it's not like many nations go for this many teams, big nations go for this many teams. Weirdly, Luxembourg and San Marino have 16. So,
but we used to have, big leagues like that too. So but it was a diluted quality. Like I remember when we had a big league, and no disrespect to these clubs, but we were going to play in like Limavady and beating them like 7 or 8-0. And then the following week, you're playing a team in the sort of upper echelons. The Saturday were quite good back then. Dungannon were great back then. And it was a better quality game. So you were playing these lower teams and hammering them, not really getting the good feel of what the league was about. But then it's probably the situation that women's football's in. You've got the gulf between the top teams and the bottom teams. When you've got a big league, it's just huge. And then it needs closed, and that's why they reduced it. And I think it's been better for it.
I think there's probably more of a groundswell support. I'm not saying it's big, but there's probably more people looking at an all-Ireland league than they would be thinking about making the league smaller. The idea of making it smaller would obviously instill fear in the teams at the bottom right now, and even teams who'd be considered teams with big fan bases, the Portadowns, Glenavons, Ballymeenas, obviously Loughgall, Dungan and Carrick, they would all feel, oh, that all of a sudden gives us a lot less slippage. And some have suggested to me that actually it would put the fear of life, because actually a lot of those teams down there rely on Glentoran and Linfield and other big Coleraine, other big supported teams coming to their ground, and there's a big difference between Dergview and Ards coming to your ground in the second tier perhaps than it would be obviously those big sides. So it's an interesting quality versus money versus sustainability, etc. One of the things that he brought up, which was very interesting, I got to give a shout out to Keith Bailey, who was reporting this in the Sunday Life, where Gerard Lawler was talking about how he personally had been warned that some NIFL players are receiving more money than is detailed in their contract. He's talking about the quote unquote brown envelope cases, where in a world where the league is talking about looking at sustainability and checking your profitability across multiple years, people are saying that some teams are paying more to their players than what's being reported. I don't want to get into who people think's happening, where it's happening, how prevalent it is, whatever, but it's very interesting to hear the CEO of the league talking about something that seems to just be terrace chatter all the time. Unfounded terrace chatter, it must be said.
Yeah, and how are they ever going to prove that? Like, it would take a player to come out and say, "Oh yeah, I was getting those payments. Look at this evidence." It's very, very difficult for him to prove. I just don't see that ever being an issue. I mean, he has to come out and warn players and warn teams that we're going to clamp down on this. And I think it's blatantly obvious to some people that this is happening. Who does it? I've no idea. No one does. You're never going to prove it. So he has to be. He can't go, well, there's nothing we can really do about it. He has to come out and say something, and that something makes headlines. So that's just the way it is.
And he has suggested that it potentially is something that happens lower down in the pyramid. And on the other hand, talking about how he wants to focus on the championship, promote it, and try and build up a fan base there. And if you're looking at the leagues, it's clearly top flight. There's a lot of room to grow there, but I think you look at that league, that 1 to 12, and the championship, even the PIL, but particularly the championship, you see a lot of teams that perhaps has some big potential. And seeing there the championship kickoff over the weekend and Bangor against the Welders getting 700 in, that was a pretty great Irish League attendance, top flight Irish League attendance a number of years ago. So to see that in the championship, we saw a couple of times at Portadown and Bangor last year, but that's very impressive. And I know that Stuart McKinley is patting himself in the back because I know he suggested this idea on the podcast with me last season, and that is that the Dundela situation will not be repeated in the future. If you are in the championship and you're in the top 6 and you haven't got your license and you can't be promoted, NIFL are saying, you're out, and someone else who can be promoted takes their place. Interesting rule change that I didn't expect to happen.
Yeah, big surprise actually. So late in the day it was announced as well. I would say the clubs probably knew about it a fair bit ago, but I think it's sensible, and I think it'll also force the hand of the likes of Dundela. They'll have to make a decision now, and I think they will apply for a ground share next season.
It's a positive from a fan's point of view. I think it's a positive from a league integrity point of view, and I think it also backs up exactly what Gerard Lawler and others in NIFL have said publicly, and that is that they talk about if you're not ready to jump on the train, it will leave the station without you, and a part of that is this professionalisation of the league. And if you're in the championship, your intention must be to get in the top flight football, and that's him saying you don't even get to be in the top half unless you want to get promoted. And big statement, but he's backing up exactly what he's saying. The top flight fixtures started on Friday night. I was there at the Oval, as was you, Matthew Brown, and the fireworks were on ice as a mistake at the back gives new signing offered the chance to take the lead for Cruise. They sat back and they eventually went out to give Declan Cadell his first win as a manager in the Irish League. Wasn't a pretty game at all. Lots of frustrations there in East Belfast, and for Cruise, they'll take it. They'll feel as though that they'll want to be better in future games. But for Glentoran, was something like this on the cards? A few players brought in, formation being tweaked, Divine still with a bit more work to do under the hood to get this Glentoran team back to where they want to be, playing great football and winning games at home.
Yeah, when the fixtures were first announced, I looked at the fixture and said, "Well, that's a nil-nil. That's a nailed-on nil-nil from them two teams." And it would have been a nil-nil had it not been for the fact that there was an absolute calamity of errors at the back. I think the Glens had about two or three opportunities for that not to happen, and yet it still happened. Very fortuitous with the bounce, and then just Harry Murphy caught flat-footed, didn't stick his foot through it. That happens because you've got two really inexperienced players playing in the back three, and in order to play in a back three, you probably need to have a bit more experience because, especially the way the Glens are playing it on Friday night, the two centre halves or two of the three centre halves in Paddy McLean and Frankie Vid were dropping into the fullback positions quite often, leaving Harry Murphy on his own. It just didn't work. And to be honest with you, it was nerve wracking the whole night because it looked like we could concede another goal at any time, even though Crusaders didn't put us under any sort of tremendous amounts of pressure whatsoever. But it just left them two young lads feeling quite nervy. And that wasn't ideal. And then obviously Harry comes off at the half time. And Frankie sees the game out, but again, he just looked quite nervous, and he's been very good in preseason, and you can't judge anything in preseason. But when I've been speaking to coaches and players about him in about preseason training, he's been excellent in training. Also, he was picked up because there's a game that takes place over in England where basically all the out of contract players play in a big 11v11. And Paddy McCourt went over and seen him, and he was excellent against his peers, and he rang up Declan Devine and says we need to sign this guy, and so he's obviously impressed in a match setting. So he's got a long career ahead of him, and I think that people are being too harsh to judge at this stage of the season. In terms of the Glens in general, it was pretty dire performance all over the pitch, very little creativity, not just at the back, but just in midfield. Really surprising team selection to see both Charlie Lindsay, who has been excellent in pre-season again, and Cammy Palmer, who was brilliant last season before he picked up his injury, both starting on the bench. Couldn't believe that. I thought that was sort of a bit of creativity taken out of the team. I mean, Crusaders weren't great either. Declan Devine said in his post-match interview that he didn't feel like Crusaders laid a glove in the Glens, and I find it hard to disagree. I think that both teams are pretty sluggish, and both will just fight it out this season for those sort of fourth to sixth spaces in the league. And that's not me being harsh at all. I just think that's the reality of where Glentoran are at the minute, and I've sort of settled myself for that a couple of months ago, and I think that it's just about consolidating this season, trying to get into Europe, and then the expectation level will go up sort of next summer.
Shape was quite interesting that Jay Donnelly also featured in a lineup with Fisher and this new striker.
Yeah, Wasim, I couldn't even give you this.
I'm calling him Was at the minute. So he was in there. Now McGinn one side. It never got its flow going at all, and it was particularly frustrating from a Glentoran point of view in that second half as they chased down that goal trying to get something going. Just passes were going amiss all the time. Players didn't feel emboldened to just take a player on and try and go to the byline to bring the ball in. A lot of work from an attacking sense, but with no Sule, it felt like actually Glentoran controlled the ball when they had it, and I think Crews were happy to sit back and let Glentoran have the ball because in the end they just couldn't get anything creative. There was no spark to try and break down that really deep, really solid Crusaders lines.
Yeah, well, I was absolutely glued to Declan Devine in the dugout, and he was going absolutely mental. I mean, I've spoken to Declan a few times now and see off the pitch. He's such a calm man. He's so well spoken, and he speaks from the heart. But see, when he's in that dugout, he goes absolutely mad. So at halftime, I thought these players are going to get a kick up the arse, and they're going to go out and really turn up in the second half, and then it was just flat. I actually thought we were better in the first half, to be honest, and in the second, Crusaders made it very difficult for us, but we just really lacked something there. Niall McGinn just didn't really do it most of the game, and Dylan Connolly was the bright spark. To be honest, he's a good player. I think he's going to be very good for us. But it just wasn't happening for us on the night, and it's so frustrating. And then you just come to accept it, and I'm sure that happens. I'm not sure. I've never played football at any sort of level, and I think that when I'm in the stand, I just accept at a certain stage this is finishing the way it's finishing, And I don't know if the players just thought that too, because the 4 minutes went up on the board and we're still making these ridiculous mistakes. And they also looked like a team who hadn't played with each other before, because they were passing balls into empty spaces. They weren't catching each other's runs. They didn't really know where the next player was going to be. It was just quite difficult to watch.
From a Crusaders point of view, I think we could see a lot of these type of games from them moving forward this season, taking the lead and then daring another team to try and break them down. I felt like I was going to be concerned about them defensively going into this season, but based on the type of players that I saw on show, some of the new signings, obviously I felt quite good about Kieran Offord going into this season based on what he could offer in those European games. It looks as though he is going to have one of these wide attacking berths, and he's quite large and physical as well. Franklin, Blaney, these are players who've come in and look to fit like a glove into this Crusader style of play. They will take you on physically and look really strong and up for the battle. And I can imagine, particularly if they take a lead in these top 6 encounters, they will be very hard to break down. The concern might be is, do they have enough to go out there and get the goals? How long Lecky is going to be out, we don't know. Where will these other attacking players fit as well, with the likes of Jordan Stewart mingling in with the rest of the team? We don't have a huge amount of answers with Crusaders either, but I think they show that they still have that fight and determination that we all know is the identity of that North Belfast side.
With a Crusaders man through and through in the dugout, he knows what they're about. He knows the sort of players he wants to sign. They will be hard to break down at times, but it's so difficult. This is what I've been saying. The people like the Glentoran social media pages have been absolutely crazy all week. You know, this is a disaster. Everything's falling apart. It's an absolute nightmare. Someone said that we should be playing in the Korean District League. It's just, people, it's all hyperboat at the stage of season, and therefore it's really hard to judge Crusaders as well, because it is so early in the season. But if we are going to go off Friday, then I think that if they can get those 1 goal, 2 goal leads, and then they'll just make it really difficult for teams. That might be what Declan Goodell tries to do in his first season as manager, just to try and sort of feel his way into it. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see.
Talking about a new manager in a new dugout, Dean Shields had the unenviable task of starting his Korean management career back at the home of his former club against a former manager of the team he's currently looking after, a very experienced manager at that. And I kind of felt this would be quite a difficult game for Korean, and it ended up being just that, down at Stagmore Park. It took a worldie from Dylan to break Korean there in that first half, and then they had to go chase the game. But if you look at any of the extended highlights, Dungannon were well in this game, were well up for it, and really took it to Coleraine. And I wonder, this, when we look back at this result, will it be seen more of a showing of actually how competitive Dungannon Swifts are going to be this season, rather than Coleraine slipping on a banana peel in their first game of a new era?
Yeah, I think Dungannon are going to be a really good team under Rodney McAree. They were last season. They played some really good football. They had some really good results. They were very hard to beat. I don't remember them getting absolutely demolished at any stage. I could be wrong. Korean, on the other hand, I think that I've said it before. I think that Korean have went too much too soon, and they've went and thrown a team together that it's a bit like the Glens. It's a bit like the Glens at the start of the takeover. I think you're going to get a lot of inconsistency with Korean, and that's not going to be good for anybody. I think that they've just got so many new players. No one's going to know what they expect. And I've seen a lot of big predictions of like Korean finishing third, getting into a title challenge, and I'm not too sure what people are basing it on. Because surely not everybody knows a hell of a lot about the players they've signed, and then you need to look at them and go, well, are those players as good as what that Cliftonville team were last season?
Well, as one of those people that were predicting Coleraine to finish third, I think Matthew Shevlin's goal really shows the type of quality that they still have in this team. I think he's the type of player that I would describe as playing angry. I mean, he loved that goal. He played the entire game with this determination that he was going to score. I think since the introduction of Jamie McGonigal earlier on this year, questions were asked, how will this impact Shevlin, who had been clearly the main man? And actually, I think it's benefited him a lot. And I thought his run into the box, the touch away from the Dungannon player, and then to wrap his boot round that and fire it high and out of reach of the goalkeeper, just shows that this is a guy still with a lot to prove, who wants to show that he is a leading man in this league and has the skill and the quality. And I was very impressed with him. He took his goal very, very well. And if they can get Shevlin and McGonigal up and running at the same time, with the likes of Glacken on one side, can they get Reece Campbell up to his best as to where he was with Dungannon? It's a potent attack. It's probably elsewhere in the pitch that they need to grow and develop. There was still a lot of passing around the back, and that's what we were expecting from Dean Shields based on his time at Dungannon Swifts. It's that centre of the park is what I'd be concerned about for Coleraine. And looking back at that game, Leo Alves, every time he got the ball for Dungannon, he was driving the ball up. Maybe this highlights how good he can be now this season, but he was causing so much trouble. Nip and tuck passes, happy to take a player on and take the ball into wide areas. He was a real heartbeat of that side, and then was able to bring in the other danger men for Dungannon and McGovern and Thomas Maguire, as well as the centre point of Andrew Mitchell. So two pretty decent sides. Dungannon will probably be happier of the two. I guess for Coleraine, the thing is that they at least get out with a point and don't start out with a loss.
Yeah, and I think that looking at Dungannon, I see Dylan. Dylan is a player who I look and I go, and I think, oh, he's one of these typical Dungannon young players who's scoring goals out of the blue, and he's actually 30. He's been about for a long time, and he flies under the radar a wee bit. He had a really good second half of the season last year for Dungannon. They just have all these really solid players. Like, I love Galvin. I think he's a great player as well, and I would have loved the Glens to have signed him. In fact, that's the sort of player I thought we would have went for this summer, to be honest. And then Gil Romana, by all accounts, he's been doing really well for them as well. So they've got this really good mix of youth and experience, and they've got a good manager. Like, Rodney Macquarie is a good manager. So I think that they'll do well this season, and Coleraine will not beat themselves up too much about drawing one each away from home, because they'll not be the last team to drop points there.
I totally agree. Ballymena, they also had a new era that they wanted to start on Saturday there, led by this marquee signing of Ben Kennedy. They knew they had a difficult task on hand with Linfield coming to the Ballymena showgrounds, and I think it was a showcase, at least from my perspective, of how Linfield, despite a lack of big, huge banner names coming into this team, that actually they have such a solid and dominating team already at their disposal. Miller and Cooper, both in the wide positions, were a threat all day. They just looked that touch faster and more rapid than their Ballymena opponents. You add in the ability of McKee and Fitzpatrick up top to kind of feed into those high end of the pitch spaces. And then, of course, you add in one of the players of the season, Cal McLean, and the disruptor in chief, Chris Shields, in the middle of the park. You take the ball out of defence, and Linfield look just to rip shreds out of Ballymena. I thought they looked so consistent and efficient, and while they never really got into high-end, free-flowing gear, I thought they looked like an impressive professional side on Saturday.
Linfield always do. That's the thing. It's really frustrating. As a Glentoran supporter, I think that no one. I've said it before on here before. No one does crisis like Linfield does crisis, and they feel like they have had a bad transfer window, and they're going to be miles behind. They'll just probably finish second again. I think Larne will win the league, and I think Linfield will finish second again. Yeah, you're right. It was just a professional performance, and they just went and got the job done.
There was something about that said to me, hold on, as much as you think across the season Linfield might not be able to get to the heights and get the same results as Larne, I thought, week in, week out, are they going to drop the points that people think they are? I know Ballymena aren't at the level, and that they could eventually be, or at least their fans will want them to be. But I look at that Linfield team and think, if that was whatever team you'd like to pick in the league, I think you could see them just churn, as they always do, as it seems on a Saturday, churn through, get the goals. And at times, looking at that game, I thought, who do you replace in this team with other players in the league? They just look to work so well together and have this confidence that is hard to shake. We'll see plenty of Saturdays like this for Linfield. From a Ballymena point of view, they probably think they've seen plenty of Saturdays just like this, and despite all the good feeling around the club, I think overall they were dominated by Linfield in large patches of the game, and Ballymena didn't really show they had a huge amount of threat. There was flashes from Ben Kennedy and others, but they haven't got it all together at the top end of the pitch, and there's still a bit of gelling to go with this side, and a side who needs massive improvements to avoid a similar fate as last season.
It's hard to judge Ballymena on a game against Linfield, I suppose. Maybe they'll not be too disappointed. It wasn't like they were completely. I mean, it's a game I didn't watch, but I was sort of keeping up to date with it. It doesn't seem like they got absolutely tortured by any means, or they didn't get embarrassed. But hard to know what they expect from Ballymena this season. They've spent some amount of money, so you would like to think that they'd have a bit better season than last year. If they were to have a season like last year, you probably wouldn't see Jim Irvin sticking it out. He'd probably be for the chopping board. I personally think that they'll probably be in that relegation scrap, even with the likes of Ben Kennedy and that. I think that other teams around them have improved. I suppose you might look at Loughgall and think they might have a bit of a second season syndrome, and then therefore Ballymena get out of it that way. But again, it's just really hard to call, because having your first game against Linfield, they wouldn't really have expected anything out of that game, I suppose.
You talked about it earlier on in the podcast, Stuart King puffing out his chest, having a good thump of it, saying this is the best Carrick side ever, and they get off to the perfect start. 2 goals in the first half, could have been a couple of more. They beat Glenavon, they're top of the league on alphabetical order. They'll take that. And it's a case of a team who looks to have a lot of positives going into the season, beating out a team who is starting to perhaps instill a bit of fear and worry in their fan base. Carrick's simple. Their attitude, the way they're set out by Stuart King is simple. Get good players and put them in and give them opportunities to deliver and score goals. And that's what they did.
Yeah, there was the second goal in particular was class, wasn't it? It was a really good piece of skill by Immaculata's, and I think that Curtis Allen does what Curtis Allen does. We've seen this for so long. He's the man that never ages. He's doing absolutely brilliant to Carrick. It's great to see. Like I say, he holds a special place in the heart of any Glentoran fan, and one of our biggest mistakes of the new year, it was definitely letting them go that January. I think that Carrick will have a good season this year. They'll try and break into that top 6. Could they do it? And possibly. They do have a good squad there, but then I look at their squad and I'm thinking they've got something like 8 or 9 former Glentoran players, so you're sort of thinking, that their Glentoran team struggled, so are they going to be any better than that? It'll be an interesting one to watch. I do think that Stuart King probably shouldn't have said what he said, to be honest. I think that those words can come back to bite you very, very quickly. It was a good result for them against a Glenavon team who, I'm just going to say it, I think they're doomed this season. I think this is finally the year. I mean, I don't say finally the year as if I want them to go down, but I'm just saying, this is the year that they've sort of held on for a wee bit last season, and I think this might be the season that they do go down.
What is it about the side? Because I know I've predicted them out of everyone to finish 12th, and that's because I have to put somebody there, but from your perspective, what is it about this side that you think has a chance to go down this year? Is it just they don't have the quality? The other teams around them have improved. What is it? Because they changed their manager last season and they got a bump and they eventually survived. Is it a case that actually Glenavon need more players, and if they do, in what positions?
Yeah, I think that they do lack quality. I think that they lack a lot of quality, to be honest. I think that they've lacked quality up front for a long time. I think in defence they've probably lacked a wee bit of quality. They're now without Sean Ward, who I always thought was, even in his latter days there, was absolutely excellent for them. And I think it's just going to be very difficult for them competing with Portadown, who've came up and they've signed fairly well. Although Portadown looked like they don't have a hell of a lot of goals in them either. I still think that Portadown will finish above them. Lockall were obviously a lot better than them last season. Likewise, Dungannon I think will be better than them. So it is a mixture of, there's teams around them that are better, and then I think Glenavon have just got maybe slightly worse. They're obviously dealing in a very, very difficult market. Like I understand that I've spoken to managers in this league, and I've spoken to chairmen and people behind the scenes, and this is a team. This is a year of my team are trying to rebuild their entire squad, and it's probably been the most difficult to operate in, and that's a team with a lot of money. So how is a team like Glenavon, who probably don't have it by the bucketful, going to get that extra bit of quality? Where do they go to? Do they do what Portadown did a couple of years ago and just go down south and sign all these players? Do they dip into the lower leagues and hope that it comes off? It's a very difficult market for them. And I just don't see them getting the quality that they need. Although I think that Michael O'Connor could be a bit of a dark horse for them. I think that he can have an extra bit of quality, but it's just about whether you can get it out of him or not.
They did come close. There was a scramble in the box that Carrick were able to just eventually fend off there. It's at the start of the season, it's strange to look on a team's bench and see two teenagers. Now, one of them is Gary Hamilton Jr., Callum Hamilton, trying to continue on a bit of a family dynasty there. But I know Harry Lynch is a younger player. Jack Malone isn't there. One of that suspension or injury. One of the things that's some fans have asked me is if I have any notion about it, but Aaron Prendergast going on loan to Dundela, a young striker, a striker who was given a lot of responsibility last year. Maybe this year could be seen as a rotational piece. Him going to Dundela when you haven't got a huge amount of numbers up top. It's puzzling when there's no one in the door just yet to kind of replace that depth.
Yeah, and I mean, people are probably asking you about it because I feel like you're a big fan of his at one stage. I feel like he was getting a mention on the podcast quite frequently.
I think he's a real, but he's got big physicality. He can definitely take the ball down, and he ultimately scored against Newry on Saturday, so he still knows where the back of the net is. At his age, I don't know if you'd want to hoist your cart onto him, but as a part of a 3 or rotational 4 at the bottom of the league, he has scored goals ultimately. And for Glenavon, I guess they'll also look forward to getting Isaac Bird back at some point. So there's some players coming back, but the bench is already looking a bit thin.
There is, and I suppose I actually said they lack a bit of quality, and they do have a bit of quality in Reece Marshall, obviously, who's a really good player if you can get him fit. Yeah, and you need a squad in this league. You really do need a squad in this league, as you see year after year. When the pitches get heavy and the bad weather comes in and injuries creep in, it can really, really get you down. And you just gotta look to your bench sometimes that you can get you out of a rut in games. I know nothing about Keith Ward. Are they hoping that he sort of kicks on and gets a few goals for them? Who knows? But again, the window's still open, so you never know. Maybe they'll bring a couple in.
Well, one that Carrick did bring in, I'll have been able to talk about it on this podcast, then gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. Paul Heatley's back playing Irish League football. He came on, he squared it for some reason to Gibson. Gibson wasn't able to wrap his boot around it. I had both those players in my fantasy team, so I was looking back at that in fear. But we'll see how much Paul plays from the start, or is he this incredible impact player from the bench? But I guess that's the difference between these two teams. Carrick can throw on somebody like that.
Yeah, that's a good signing for them. Exciting. Thought he was maybe calling it quits too early, to be honest with you. And since he had no intentions of going into coaching as well, it's a big commitment to just give up football forever. I think that he'll play plenty of games there, to be honest. Strikes me as someone who's looked after himself. And I think that they've recruited smart. They've got so much experience, Carrick. I think that's a big thing for them. They've signed, obviously, Luke McCulloch, who's he's got played a lot of games in the Football League as well. And now they've got Paul Heatley, who has 3 league titles. They've signed winners. They've signed players who can maybe get them over the line in then tough situations. And then they've got the solid. They've kept all their players that they wanted to keep as well, and that's a big thing for them.
Final game of the weekend, Sunday at Solitude. They've found their striker. It's an old name and a favourite over there in North Belfast. Ryan Curran shaking off missing that penalty against Portadown, scoring in the first half. That was all she wrote for the Ports. Cliftonville get their season off to a win. And in a kind of a funny game where Cliftonville dominated, but unsurprisingly and slightly worrying for them, they just didn't have that real cutting edge or end product in the box and high up the
It
pitch.
just sort of seems that maybe Portadown are, despite shelling out this season, maybe they're going to be lacking a few goals. Everyone thought that Cliftonville would be lacking goals, but then Ryan Curran, I hear, has had an outstanding pre-season, and he obviously scored yesterday, and missed a penalty, obviously. But I think that I just don't think there's going to be I don't know what to call on these two teams. It's so difficult because I see people predicting Portadown to come up, like maybe finish around 7th or 8th. And I've seen people predict Cliftonville to finish around 6th. And this game yesterday told us absolutely nothing probably about both teams. Each team just did what they did. And I don't think the Portadown were going to go to Solitude yesterday and expect to get anything.
Yeah, typical opening game of the season where both teams look a bit nervy and are trying to shake off some of the cobwebs themselves. Questions over the penalty. It was a penalty. There's no doubt. He spun in the box, but there was a trailing leg. Took him down. Great save from McCurry down to his right-hand side. Otomosu did something very similar late on in the game when Stephen McCulloch was on the edge of the box. I mean, Culloch is deadly when he gets the chance and a bit of space to get his left boot around a ball, and it just looked as though it was curling in, but a big firm hand. Otomosu didn't have a lot to do with that game, but that was a big moment late on when Portland hadn't really tested him at all, but they threw the kitchen sink in injury time and they nearly sneaked away with a point. Portland look a bit more solid, but still, again, they had no out ball. You took the ball beyond their midfield and no one was really able to secure the ball. No Paul McElroy. They got rid of Zach Barr. Do they have suddenly a striking issue themselves? Because as much as McCartan would be considered a forward, he is not your top of the pitch number one. He can absolutely carry the ball, but he's not the man to lead an entire line. And I think we saw that. Big credit has to go to Rowan Doherty, one of the most underrated players in the league. It was his quick ball into the box from deep that found Donnelly, that was able to square it into the path of Ryan Curran. That was a beauty, and for Cliftonville, it gets them the points. I totally agree with you. I think both teams need to improve higher up the pitch. Where they find these players, I don't know. Maybe there'll be a few flyers sent out or backed over the next week or so. I think Curry's talked about maybe bringing some players in. No doubt Cliftonville will try to bring players in. Well, I think for both teams, we could see games like this where they're solid enough at the back, but they're frustrated going forward.
There's a guy on TikTok that's trying to be a professional footballer. I think maybe Portadown or someone could look at him. He's big and he could play him up front. I think his name Dow or something.
Diao, I've heard that Diao actually played some minutes as a striker for Portadown during pre-season. So if he does go and he's on the transfer list now, I think we'll be robbed of a David James-esque moment as he did for Man City for Stuart Pearce. Not exactly the same kind of thing, but Brandon Diao playing up top is not very 2024 football. Or maybe he has that in him. I don't know, but I don't think we're going to see much of that this season.
There was one thing, and I noticed on social media in the 97th minute, the Portadown Twitter account said that Portadown have won a free kick on the edge of the box, and Shane McCartan steps over to then hit the wall. I'm going to miss that.
We'll start with Friday. Only Seems Right. Once again streamed and televised for us all to enjoy. You can, of course, go if you happen to be in the vicinity. It's our first derby game of the season. Is this the North Coast one? Or I Ballymena doesn't really feel like North Coast to me.
It's definitely not. It's mid-Antrim.
Definitely not. Coleraine, Ballymena. How do we feel about this? Neither team got 3 points in their opening game. Can they get it this time round?
Ballymena have Coreen's number, don't they? Like in the last season, even though they've been absolutely dire, I feel like Ballymena have got some really good results against Coreen. I haven't got the statistics in front of me, but I'm pretty sure last season Ballymena scalped them a couple of times. Um, Coreen, as I said before, they're a bit of an unknown this year. They're going to go into this game and hope that this can really kickstart their season. But it is a hard one to call. I think that, you know what, I'm going to go for the draw. I think that I think it's going to be difficult for Korean to sort of just start to click straight away. I think that Ballymena will want to get points on the board after a disappointing result against Linfield, despite the fact it was Linfield. And I just have a feeling that it might just be a score draw, like a 2-2 or something like that.
There's a massive part of me that thinks that is going to be the case, but the parts that I saw from that Korean performance against the Swifts said to me they take it back to the showgrounds, back in front of their home fans. They've got their first goal, which is oftentimes the first big monkey on a team's back. As much as Ballymena have had their number and have been a real thorn in the side for Korean recently, and they have plenty of ex-Korean players who are back at the showgrounds pretty quickly, I think this is going to be 3-1 Korean. I think they'll have too much going forward, and I think ultimately might just outscore Ballymena, who could show a decent outing of themselves, and I think we'll all get the chance to have a good view at what both these teams now look like. But I think Coleraine still have the quality advantage, so yeah, 3-1.
I think at this time last season that they played each other actually, and Korean absolutely battered them. I think Ballymena go 1-0 up, and then Korean battered them. So you could be right; it could go that way again.
Glenavon welcome in Coleraine to Mournview Park. Can they bounce back from that poor result against Carrick and beat the Reds? I do not think so. It must be said, I still have concerns about Cliftonville going forward, but just the way that back line and the way that they were at 6s and 7s at times against Carrick Rangers, the quality that Cliftonville still have, I'm actually going to back Ryan Curran to get a brace here, and I'm going to say 2-0.
Yeah, I think Cliftonville will have too much for Glenavon as well. I can't go and slag off Glenavon in the previous link and then start talking about them getting points off Cliftonville here. I just think that although Cliftonville have lost players, they've still got a lot of quality in that team. Like, there's plenty of Cliftonville players I'd take in a Glentoran team. So I think they're going to go here and probably win 2-0 as well. I just don't see Glenavon scoring.
Dungannon go up to Windsor Park for what could be the first big shock of the season. They did the Swifts last year at Windsor Park and pulled out a great result against Linfield, one of the real low moments of the Blues season last year. Dungannon look sharp, fit and ready. So do Linfield. On that home patch, Linfield are fairly ruthless. I can't really back that one game last year to say that Dungannon could do it. A draw wouldn't surprise me, but I think on that big pitch, Linfield will win out. I'm going to say 3-1.
Yeah, this is, if you remember last year, Dungannon also played Linfield and they went 3-1 up at one stage, and then Linfield ended up winning 4-3. So these are exciting games last year. A Dungannon win and then a high scoring Linfield win back in December. But I do think that Linfield are just going to go and should probably beat Dungannon fairly handy enough. I reckon it might be 3-1.
One of the more exciting fixtures last year for me was Loughgall against Carrick Rangers. This was a part of the big, surprising to many people based on how they were set up at the start of the season, battles for 7th place. It always gave goals. It always gave a lot of tenacity in the middle of the park. Carrick go down to Lakeview Park. We don't know how Loughgall are shaping up this year. Jay Boyd is returning there to add a bit of steel up top for the Villagers. Is that a sign that potentially a forward is on their way out of Loughgall? Benji McGee's still there. Nathaniel Ferris is still there. I really like Loughgall. I know it's kind of my gimmick, but I'm also massively on this Carrick Rangers train this year. I think this is going to be 3-2 to Carrick.
I was going to say that too. I'll have to go with a different scoreline now. I think on the basis of last season, where it was just like such high scoring games, there was a 4-3 and possibly a 3-2 in there, or a 3-3. There was loads and loads of goals. And I think that Carrick will have lots of goals in them this season. I have no doubt about that. So I was expecting sort of a 3-2 or a 4-3 or something like that, because Nathaniel Ferris and Benji McGee, and they've got some good players in there too who can get in goals. So and it'll be interesting to see how I think that this Carrick defense now comes up against a team who are known for scoring goals. Whereas I think that despite that really gripping clearance at the weekend in their game against Glenavon, I think that this is a real test for their defense. So I'll go for a 3-2 as well.
And as it was pointed out last week, Carrick did not have a great defensive record. If it wasn't for Nuri, I think they would have been bottom, it had been suggested to me. So perhaps a fresh look all can exploit that. Watch out for the likes of Caleb McAleer, again, a dark horse in this league. But yeah, I'm going to say 3-2 to Carrick. Then Portadown, Glentoran, one of the previous kind of big, tasty games in the league. I think it's been Glentoran's fixture in recent times. Down at Shamrock Park, you have the names of McCartan, you have McCary and Nets, got off to a good start for the Ports. I'm sure there'll be a big crowd there at Shamrock Park. Can Glentoran shake off the rustiness from last week and get the victory here? I'm sure if you're Portadown, you'll think this is a great time to play Glentoran, but they thought that on Sunday and they really didn't get into any sort of attacking flow on Sunday. I'm going to say 1-1.
It's been 9 years since Portadown beat the Glens, which is absolutely mad to think, because this was one of the best fixtures in the entire division for so many years. The rivalry was great, and I still love going to Shamrock Park, to be honest. I do think that a lot's been made of Glentoran's performance last Friday, and I understand that there's a lot of frustration. Glens are bringing a big crowd. There's only 100 odd tickets left already at this stage. They always bring a big crowd. It's always quite noisy. And I think that with that support on their side, you'll maybe get some of the new boys really stepping up their game and seeing what it's like to play for Glentoran. I just hope. And I think that Glentoran will possibly win out 3-1 winners. But I do see Shane McCartan having an absolute stormer of a game, because I think he's got a real bee in his bonnet about his time at Glentoran, and I think that he's going to have a bit of the Ronnie McFalls about him. He was always well up for it when he was at Portadown. So I think that he'll be the goal scorer for Portadown, but I think the Glentoran will win out 3-1 winners.
Is that what they call it? A bit of the Ronnie McFalls? I think if you were to give a marker of game most likely to have a red card over the weekend, I think I would put my token on this one. It could be for either team. I just think perhaps both teams would really like a win here, and these are both two passionate managers, and sometimes these 3 o'clock games can inspire a bit of gusto if there's a lot on the line in the last 20 minutes. So yeah, difference of opinion there. Will it be shared when we go to another Sunday game? Larne, they'll not have to be travelling back from Europe, but they will have played a big game there on during midweek against Balcani. They go to Seaview, a notoriously difficult place, and against Crusaders, it's such an easy out to say a draw. But you know what? I'm not going to say that, and I think this is actually going to be 2-0 Larne.
Yeah, I think Larne will win this 1 or 2-0. I think that the risk is something really disappointing happens to them on Thursday, and then that hangover carries into Sunday, because I remember that happened with Linfield a few years ago against Carrick after the RFS result.
RFS, yeah.
And it's not really that there isn't that much time between Thursday and Sunday, and then things can really play on your mind. This is obviously Larne's first game of the season as well, a league game of the season. So I think that it's you just don't know what you can get, but I do think they'll win 1 or 2-0. But I think that if something really, really dramatic happens on Thursday, I think the Crusaders can definitely get something here.
And we've seen in encounters between these two sides before, it's physical, it's tough, it's hard, it's that small pitch at Seaview. We talk about it all the time. Can Larne squeeze out the goals there? I think they will. I still think this is an immensely strong Larne side. They've got great players who come off the bench if things aren't working. So yeah, I'm going to be bold. I'm going to say 2-0. Matthew, that's our lot for this week. Properly back, properly reviewing games, properly covering the news, looking ahead the games. Is there a Shout at the Oval podcast that you can all point these fine people to get more in-depth thoughts on that team from East Belfast?
Yeah, so Shout Out the Oval podcast is back this week. Going to be releasing that towards the end of this week, and it's a bit of a look ahead to the season. I'm recording it after the Cruise game, just so we got a bit of a feeling, we had something to talk about as opposed to just playing lower league opposition. But even if you're not a Glentoran supporter, there is plenty of podcasts on there that you might want to go listen to, because Glentoran have had a wide array of players over the last few years from all different clubs. There's one there from Shay McCartan. It's one of the most listened to episodes, actually. Spoke to Shay last year, not last season, season before. And so you'll go on and find something, I'm sure, related to your club, and give it a wee listen.
On that, very quickly, I know one of the stories that came out just before the game on Friday that the away stand was not available for Cruise fans, the kind of old shed style covering on Friday night. Are we expecting that to be a long-term thing? Are you aware? Or
no? Well, basically what happened was Glentoran made the decision. This was not a decision from Belfast City Council to close the stand. You have to put in an application for a safety certificate, and that stand needed work done on it. Hopefully it isn't too costly, and hopefully it can be reopened, but it wasn't a case of the council says no, you can't open that. It was very much Glentoran's decision.
Matthew, I appreciate the insight, analysis, and everything that you offer. Again, great to chat to you. I'm sure we'll chat to you again very, very soon. Until next time, cheerio.
Pleasure as always, Peter. Thanks.
Just imagine it, listener. Currently, Tom Cruise is skydiving onto my desk. He's picking up the cable that is connected to my microphone, and he's about to unplug it and transfer it into somewhere else as we say goodbye for this week. Thank you very much for listening. I was chatting to somebody about how only the absolute hardcores listen to this part, and if you're listening to this, you are hardcore. So thank you very much for listening. I said a lot of this spiel actually at the top of this episode, so you know the crack. You should review this podcast if you like it. Obviously, if you're here, you probably do. It'd be very, very nice. You can subscribe. Big part of it. I mean, it just helps you rather than helps me, because it means you get a little notification telling you when I've got this. Socials. I'm posting videos now. Aren't I fancy? 2024. You can follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, and Facebook, where I'll post them. I'm being bullied by my friends to go on to TikTok. I don't think I'll do it, but I'll have to see. It's Kicking Match. Follow it, wherever it may be. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week if you're here. And if you are here, it'll be on Tuesday. Have a great time. Cheerio. Au revoir.